Welcome to New Possibilities. I speak truth to power without fear. So, this is a quick video about Tamera. She's one of the hosts on this show called The Real. Many people know her from the TV sitcom Sister Sister that was done back in the 90s. So, this is a biracial woman for those people who don't know. One of her parents is black, one parent is white. She is married to a white man. And recently, she made a statement on her show, The Real, about her husband. And this is what she said. She said, "There are some people who think my husband is racist because he worked for a certain channel." And that channel was Fox News or Fox. Also, she went on to say this. She said, "I'm going to look in that camera right there and let everyone know that my husband is not a racist." Now, her husband was involved in a controversy some time ago, like not too long ago, involving some statements that he made on the issue of the 4th of July. He put out a statement on Instagram basically talking about how Americans are one and how we all should celebrate the 4th of July and it's all wonderful and this and that. And basically, I'm summing it up. I'll post a link to a couple of articles in the description box when I get a chance to provide all the details. So, in response to that, you had African Americans basically point out to him that on the 4th of July, the date of national independence, black people were still held in bondage. Black people were still slaves in this country. Black people were still bought, owned, beaten, and deprived of any semblance of human or civil rights. So they brought this to this man's attention and basically said that the 4th of July is not necessarily a holiday for black people. And then they also pointed out the fact that we continue to live in a country that is plagued by racism, a country where you have police brutality regularly occurring, where you have race discrimination continuing to be a major problem in this country. So they basically said that this country is not one. We are not one people. There's still racial division in this country, racial animosity. So, in response to that, this man was dismissive of those concerns. This man basically said people that raise such concerns and such issue are the problem. He described them as living their life in a hole. And he said the rest of us are moving on, basically dismissing, these problems of racism in this country, dismissing the legacy of segregation in this country and slavery in particular, just dismissing all this stuff, brushing it aside, downplaying it. And at the time when that controversy took place, Tamara didn't raise any issues. She didn't comment on it at all. She said nothing about this controversy. And not too long ago, she was on her show and she basically was bragging about how her white husband put her in check because she made some statements about, she asked him if he wanted some mayo on his sandwich, if he wanted a lot of mayo. And apparently there's some stereotype about white people liking mayo, mayonnaise. And basically he said, well, just because I'm white, that doesn't mean that I like mayo. I don't even like mayo and all that kind of stuff. And she was like celebrating this as if this is some great thing that he put her in check. So I just want to share my thoughts about whether or not this man is a racist. First of all, we know that Fox News is racist. They regularly resort to race baiting. This is well documented. Numerous programs prove this point. And not only do they race bait, they constantly get these buck dancing coons on their show to disparage black people. They use these coons as buffer Negroes. They use these coons as mouthpieces for white supremacy on a regular basis to promote negative stereotypes about black people, to attack black people, to disparage black people. And since they're using black people to do this, they can say, well, we're not racist. These are black people making these statements. They use these black people to add authenticity to their racism and, their bigoted views about black people. You have all those programs on Fox News that regularly bash black people, regularly criminalize black victims of police brutality, regularly make excuses for these pigs that kill black people. So there is something to it. There's something to the fact that this man worked for Fox News. Out of all the channels, all the stations someone has an option to work for, that man picked Fox to work for. And I think that that alone speaks volumes. Even if one were to say, well, he's not a racist, it proves that that man is culturally insensitive. It proves that he doesn't really give a damn about the plight of black people. Fox News is a channel that regularly bashes social justice groups, people who are demanding justice in society. They try to paint them as the victimizers, and they try to paint the white man as the victim. That's what Fox News does. And the fact that you had this man working for that channel, that speaks volumes. That tells you about his political ideology. It tells you about his leanings. It tells you about his sensibilities. So there's something to the fact that this man decided to work for Fox News. So that's one thing that I have to highlight. Another thing is this, man. His statements around the 4th of July. Now, his initial statement, you could say, well, he's ignorant, by saying, well, we're all one and we should all celebrate the 4th of July. That's a matter of ignorance. But it's his response to people that questioned him about that statement is what is telling. The fact that he was dismissive, talking about we're moving on. Basically saying we're moving on from slavery. We're not talking about that. Every other group of people, they're allowed to celebrate their history. They're allowed to continue to mourn the suffering of their ancestors and their elders. When 9/11 happened, they said we will never forget. When the Holocaust happened in Germany, they said we'll never forget. But when it comes to black people and slavery and the legacy of Jim Crow, we're always told, get over it, it's the past, etc. So that's an indication that this man has no cultural sensitivity when it comes to these issues. And the fact that this man would still have that posture when people pointed out to him modern day examples of racism, when they talked about how we continue to live in a racist society, how we continue to suffer from problems like police brutality and other examples of racism, this man was dismissive. This man described people that raise such issues as living in a hole. That's how he described them. He described these people that raise legitimate questions about whether or not black people should celebrate the 4th of July as being the problem. Racism isn't the problem in this man's eyes. Police brutality isn't the problem in this man's eyes. The fact that people raise those issues and discuss those issues is a big problem for this guy. And, I just think that, it's just an indication of this man's lack of sensitivity. And, the fact that this woman would marry a white man that doesn't even have any kind of empathy or sympathy towards the plight of black people just tells you how this woman has a Negro bed wench mentality. Now, it's one thing for somebody to decide to date outside of their race or to marry outside of their race. But if you're going to do so, at least get somebody that's compassionate, somebody that cares, or at least pretends to care about your people and your plight. I mean, imagine her having a discussion with this guy about racism that she's experienced. Imagine how that conversation is going to go. How can you marry somebody that has no concern or no compassion or no empathy for the plight of your people? How can you marry such a man? But this is typical. I mean, we see this all the time. We see examples of these ignorant black women, and I'm not speaking about most black women or even, a large number, but you have enough black women who are willing to put up with this stuff, who are actually in relationships with white racists, who make excuses for these white racists. We saw that situation with that interracial couple here on YouTube, where this man was making all these disparaging remarks about black women and black people in general, but yet you had this African woman defending that white racist. You had the example of this white racist who was going off about Black Lives Matter and going off about how they support Trump and, using the N-word and all that kind of stuff while his black girlfriend recorded the incident. You have reports of black women and their husbands, for instance, getting off by using the N-word, getting off by, you know, degrading black people. But these women are in relationships with these people. That is the bed wench mentality. And unfortunately, too many women have that mentality. That is the slave mentality that too many of our women have embraced. You know, that's the Stockholm syndrome issue that some of our women have suffered from. You know, where they feel the need to identify with the same person that is discriminating against their own people, the same person that has no respect for their own people. And, you know, the last thing I want to touch on is, you know, just the biracial dynamic. You know, in this society, biracial people are treated like black people. They are viewed as being black. And unfortunately, you know, some of these biracial people have mixed loyalties. You know, they're not, you know, some of them are not loyal to the black race. You know, a lot of times they identify with white people more so than their black side of their family. You know, a lot of times these people do exactly what their parents did. You know, they decide to be with non-black people. They have the same hang-ups that their parents had. You know, they have the same black inferiority complex and white superiority complex. So they carry out what their black parent did by getting with a white person, you know, thereby diluting their blackness. And often, you know, you have these people that don't have any kind of racial pride or identity, and they are willing to put up with this kind of nonsense. Like that woman that was on here, like, you know, a while ago with the racist boyfriend making a statement. She was biracial and her boyfriend was white. So, you know, I just had to share this, you know, these quick thoughts about this situation. And, you know, the last thing I'll close on is this, you know, this whole thing where she's on television bragging about how her white husband checked her. I mean, can you imagine a black woman on television talking about how her black husband checked her and bragging about it? I mean, that would be an absolute anomaly. But for some reason, some black women and some biracial women don't have any problem submitting to the white man, don't have any problem bragging about it, you know, don't have any problem at all about doing that. But when it comes to the black man, they don't recognize black male authority. They don't have any respect for the black man. They don't want to listen to the black man. They want to buck up against the black man. They want to compete with the black man. And it just goes back to the slave logic, man, where the slave was programmed to have so much love and admiration and reverence for the white man, but when it came to their own black brothers, they didn't have any respect at all for them. So that's my 2 cents. Tell me what y'all think. Please rate, comment, and subscribe. Peace.